You're not taking my baby. Sarah's voice cracked like a whip through the cold night air, her words sharp enough to cut through the snarling chaos of the dogs circling her. She clutched her infant daughter, Lily, to her chest, her heart pounding as the flashlight beams from the men in the distance sliced through the darkness. The farm was her sanctuary, her home, until tonight when they came for her. Stay back, she shouted, her voice steady, despite the fear clawing at her insides. The dogs grow louder, their teeth glinting in the moonlight. But Sarah wasn't just a farm mom. She was something else entirely, something they'd soon regret underestimating. Hey, if you're new here, hit that subscribe button to join our community of story lovers. We're diving into a wild ride tonight, and you won't want to miss a second of it. The night had started like any other on Sarah's small Nebraska farm. The crickets sang the usual chorus, and the stars hung low over the rolling fields of corn and wheat. Sarah, a 32-year-old single mom, had just put Lily to bed in their cozy farmhouse, the kind with creaky floors and a porch that groaned under the weight of too many memories. She was sipping chamomile tea, her coal-oused hands wrapped around the mug, when she heard it, a low, guttural growl from the edge of her property. Her German shepherd, Max, perked up from his spot by the fireplace, his ears twitching. Sarah's instincts kicked in, sharp and honed from years of training she thought she'd left behind. She set the mug down, her movements slow but deliberate, and reached for the flashlight by the door. Sarah wasn't always a farmer. A decade ago, she'd been Staff Sergeant Sarah Mitchell, a military dog handler with the U.S. Army's K9 unit. She'd trained some of the fiercest cannons in the world, dogs that could sniff out explosives, take down hostiles, and protect their handlers with unwavering loyalty. She'd served 2 tours in Afghanistan, where her quick thinking and bond with her dogs saved countless lives. But after a roadside bomb left her with scars, both visible and hidden, she'd retired, craving the quiet life. She bought the farm, had Lily, and swore she'd never look back. The dogs, the danger, the adrenaline, she'd buried it all. Or so she thought. The girls outside grew louder, joined by the crunch of boots on gravel. Sarah's pulse quickened, but her training kept her calm. She slipped on her boots, grabbed the old hunting rifle from the closet, and whispered to Max, "Stay close, boy." She stepped onto the porch, the cool September air biting at her skin. The flashlight beam swept across her property, catching glints of eyes in the darkness. Dogs, at least 3 of them, moving fast. They weren't strays. Their movements were too coordinated, too aggressive. And then she saw them. 4 men in dark jackets, their faces obscured by the shadows, standing at the edge of her field. One held a leash, but it was empty. The dogs weren't on leashes. They were unleashed, and they were coming for her. Sarah's mind raced. This wasn't random. Her farm sat on the outskirts of a small town, a place where everyone knew everyone, and trouble rarely stirred. But lately, there had been whispers, rumors of a local developer, Marcus Tate, strong-arming farmers to sell their land for a massive commercial project. Sarah had refused his offers politely at first, then firmly. Her land was her legacy for Lily, and no amount of money would change that. But Tate wasn't the kind of man who took no for an answer. The men on her property, the dogs, they had his fingerprints all over them. "Get off my land," Sarah called out, her voice steady, but laced with steel. She raised the rifle, not aiming yet, just making her point. The men didn't flinch. One of them, taller than the rest, stepped forward, his face still hidden in the dark. "You should have sold when you had the chance, lady," he said, his voice low and mocking. "Now it's going to cost you." He whistled sharply, and the dogs lunged. Sarah's training took over. She dropped to one knee, shielding Lily, who was now awake and whimpering in her arms. The first dog, a massive Rottweiler, charged straight at her, its jaws snapping. Sarah didn't hesitate. She whistled, a sharp, piercing sound she hadn't used in years. The Rottweiler froze, its ears twitching. Confused, Sarah's voice dropped to a low, commanding tone. "Down," she barked, her eyes locked on the dogs. To the men's shock, the Rottweiler hesitated, then dropped to its belly, whining softly. Sarah's years as a handler had taught her how to read a dog's body language, how to assert dominance without cruelty. These dogs weren't feral, they were trained, but poorly, and she could exploit that. The other two dogs, a pit bull and a Doberman, didn't stop. They barreled toward her, the growls filling the night. Sarah's heart pounded, but she didn't falter. She swung the rifle up, firing a warning shot into the air. The crack of the gunshot echoed across the fields, and the dog skidded to a halt, startled. Max, her loyal shepherd, growled at her side, ready to defend her. "Stay," she told him, her voice calm, but firm. She couldn't risk Max getting hurt. Not yet. The men were rattled now, their plan unraveling. "What the hell?" one of them muttered, stepping back. The tall man, clearly the leader, wasn't fazed. "You think you're tough, farm girl?" he sneered. "Those dogs will rip you apart. Hand over the kid and maybe we let you walk away." Sarah's blood ran cold. They weren't just after her land. They wanted Lily. Her mind flashed to the rumors she'd ignored. Whispers of Tate's shady dealings, of families disappearing after refusing to sell. She'd thought they were just small-town gossip. Now she wasn't so sure. Sarah tightened her grip on Lily, who was sobbing softly against her chest. "You're not touching her," she said, her voice low and deadly. She whistled again, this time a different pitch, one she'd used in the military to signal her dogs to flank. To her surprise, the Rottweiler responded, shifting its position as if awaiting her command. The men didn't notice, but Sarah did. She had an ally now, one they didn't expect. The tension hung thick in the air. The only sounds, the dogs, low growls and Lily's quiet sobs. Sarah's mind raced, piecing together a plan. She needed to protect Lily, neutralize the dogs, and deal with the men, all without losing control. She glanced at the farmhouse where her phone sat on the kitchen counter. If she could get inside, she could call for help. But the men were closing in, their flashlights now trained on her like spotlights. There was no running. "Last chance," the tall man said, pulling a handgun from his jacket. "Give us the kid or we end this now." Sarah's stomach twisted, but she didn't flinch. She'd faced worse odds in Afghanistan. Insurgents, ambushes, bombs. These men were amateurs, and the dogs were no match for her. She just needed to buy time. "Okay," she said, her voice softer now, feigning surrender. She lowered the rifle slightly, keeping her eyes on the tall man. "Just don't hurt her." The men relaxed, thinking they'd won. Big mistake. Sarah whistled again, a sharp two-note signal. The Rottweiler sprang to its feet, not charging at her, but at the pit bull, tackling it to the ground in a blur of fur and teeth. The Doberman hesitated, confused, giving Sarah the opening she needed. She bolted for the farmhouse, clutching Lily tightly. The men shouted, cursing as they scrambled to control the dogs. Sarah reached the porch, slamming the door behind her and locking it. She set Lily in her crib, whispering, "You're safe, baby," before grabbing her phone and dialing 911. "Intruders on my property," she said, her voice steady as she gave the dispatcher her address. "They've got dogs and guns. Hurry." But Sarah knew help wouldn't come fast enough. The nearest sheriff's station was 20 minutes away, and the men were already pounding on the door. She could hear the dogs barking outside, their confusion turning to aggression again. Sarah grabbed her old military gear from the closet, a tactical vest, a knife, and a canister of pepper spray. She hadn't touched them in years, but they felt like old friends in her hands. She slipped the vest on, tucked the knife into her belt, and checked the rifle's magazine. 3 rounds left. It would have to be enough. The door shuttered under a heavy blow, wood splintering. Sarah positioned herself by the window, peering out. The men were regrouping, the tall one barking orders. The Rottweiler was back under their control, but the Pitbull and Doberman were pacing agitated. Sarah's mind flashed to her training. Dogs like these responded to strength, not fear. She needed to turn the tables. She opened the window just enough to whistle again. A long, low note that carried across the yard. The Rottweiler's head snapped up, its ears twitching. Sarah's heart pounded as she gave another command, this time in German, a language she'd used with her military dogs. Angriff, she shouted. Attack. The Rottweiler didn't hesitate. It turned on the tall man, lunging at him with a ferocity that sent him sprawling. The other men shouted, trying to call the dog off, but it was too late. Sarah had flipped the script. The door burst open, and one of the men charged in, gun raised. Sarah was ready. She sprayed the pepper spray in a wide arc, catching him in the face. He screamed, dropping the gun as he clawed at his eyes. Sarah kicked the weapon away, then tackled him to the ground, her knee pressing into his chest. "Who sent you?" she demanded, her voice like ice. The man gasped, choking on the spray, but didn't answer. Outside, the chaos continued. The Rottweiler had turned on the other dogs, and the men were struggling to regain control. Sarah tied the man's hands with a zip tie from her gear, then dragged him to the closet and locked him inside. She didn't have time to interrogate him. The tall man was still out there and he was the real threat. She grabbed the rifle and stepped back onto the porch, her eyes scanning the darkness. The Rottweiler had the tall man pinned, its jaws inches from his throat. The other two men were trying to pull it off, but they were losing. "Call it off," the tall man shouted, his voice cracking with fear. Sarah walked forward, her rifle trained on him. "Tell me why you're here," she said. "And don't lie." The man's eyes darted, searching for an out, but the Rottweiler's growl kept him in place. "Tate," he spat finally. "Marcus, Tate, he wants your land. Said you were trouble. Told us to take the kid, make you disappear." Sarah's blood boiled. She'd suspected Tate, but hearing it confirmed lit a fire in her. "You thought you could scare me," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "You thought you could take my daughter." She whistled again, and the Rottweiler backed off, sitting obediently at her side. The other dogs, sensing the shift cowed, Sarah's presence was commanding, unyielding, a warrior reborn. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. The men froze, realizing their time was up. The tall man tried to run, but Sarah was faster. She tackled him, pinning him to the ground with the same precision she'd used in combat. "You're done," she said, her voice a promise. The other two men dropped their weapons, hands raised, as the sheriff's deputies pulled into the driveway, lights flashing. The aftermath was a blur. The men were arrested, the dogs taken into custody by animal control. Sarah's quick thinking had saved her and Lily, but the victory felt hollow. She sat on the porch holding her daughter as the deputies took statements. The Rottweiler, now calm, lay at her feet, its loyalty shifted to her. She'd later learn it had been mistreated by Tate's men, trained for violence, but starved for trust. Sarah would adopt it, naming it Bravo, a nod to her military past. The investigation unraveled Tate's operation. He'd been intimidating farmers for years, using hired muscle and trained dogs to force sales. The men who'd attacked Sarah confessed, implicating Tate in a string of crimes. He was arrested the next day, his empire crumbling under the weight of evidence Sarah's bravery had exposed. The town rallied around her, calling her a hero. But Sarah didn't feel like one. She was just a mom protecting her daughter, a woman who'd found her strength when it mattered most. As the sun rose over the farm, Sarah stood in her field, Lily in her arms, Bravo at her side, and Max wagging his tail. The land was hers, her daughter was safe, and the ghosts of her past had become her greatest weapon. She'd faced the dogs, the men, the fear, and she'd won. So, from which part of the country are you watching this video? If you're new here, make sure to subscribe. We've got more incredible stories like this coming your way. And let me know in the comments, do you think Sarah's justice was enough, or should Tate face even more consequences for what he